Paul, after talking about how to relate with older people and how to treat them, now moves on in this relationship chapter to talk about widows. Verse 3 says, give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need. And I think that's a very important thing to understand. The first thing we must talk about is proper recognition. It means some people can be poor, but because they are not recognized, they will continue to suffer. Not because the Christians around them are not interested in helping them, they don't even know they exist. And so we need, as a church, to identify around us in our captive area to understand the sociological issues that are around us. I think it's important for us not to think that the people we are sent to are our church members. No, we are sent to the community. The church members are the people we disciple in order to reach the community. And when we reach the community, it means we meet them where they are in their place of need. It's a pity that a lot of churches, if you check their financial report, all the money they receive in tithe and offerings, they are the same ones using it, paying salaries, meeting certain costs, doing construction. And it sounds like the mission of the church is to itself. I think we have to work on many of the churches and pastors to understand they are not sent to their members, they are sent to their community and beyond, begin Jerusalem, moving onwards. So I would expect several things. The moment you plant a church in a place, you have taken responsibility of the people within a certain radius of your church. So you therefore expect you to study that community to know what are their social needs, what are the challenges they are facing, in which ways are they doing well, in which ways are they not doing well. How can your presence bring a difference in that community? When the first missionaries came to Kenya, they would always go to a place, look for somebody willing to give them land, and then, of course, they are quick adapters. They are people who hear the word and follow it early. And those people, of course, were seen as people who are taking risks because the demonic spirit will be on their case. Okay, the word they use is not demonic spirit. They talk about ancestral spirits, but it's the same thing. So they are seen to be taking a lot of risk. I was told by my grandfather that those people who follow the Mzungu is like they were not stable in their mind. They were said to even, because it's a way of showing how much they don't fear the dead, they would drink water using the heads of the skulls of people. Of course, it may not be true, but they just wanted to graphically show how different those locals, after they received the Lord, their belief system, their behavior was totally different. But then he immediately knew that these people have needs. So in addition to the church, the missionary would organize a school because he knew they would need to know how to read and write. Then after some time, there will be a clinic with many of single ladies who came as missionaries, playing that very important role of running the clinic so that he meets the health needs of those people. And because of that triumvirate of looking after people's health, looking after people's education, looking after their spiritual and religious needs, the church within 60 years, almost every corner where the first missionaries went had been reached out. It doesn't mean they had become Christians, but they now knew what Christianity was all about. So I think it's important for us to understand that important thing that Paul is showing. When you go to a place, you will be interested in analyzing the needs of the people. You also be interested in understanding their financial resources and where they get their money from, so that you don't start expecting them to tithe money they don't actually have. And so you will also learn how to help them. Some of the things the missionary did was to organize training in agriculture and introduced new crops, which was a good thing. But in addition to that, they also taught carpentry. They had things trades that they taught the new Christians. So let me ask you now, as a pastor, how are you meeting the needs of the community around you? How are you discipling your church members to see those needs as needs that must be met because Christ has sent us to them? Or are you totally ignoring those needs? But the first thing is, here, we need to recognize those needs. Number two, we need to recognize who has those needs. And number three, we need to ask ourselves, how can we relieve them of their suffering? How can we help them meet their needs? Of course, there is a danger of many NGOs. Instead of helping the people to meet their needs, they actually impoverish them by giving them free things. So even the little farming they were doing, they actually stopped farming because now they are getting relief food. I don't think that's a very good way of dealing with the problem. I think it will be important that you help people to move from poverty rather than impoverish them by giving them, the relief food. When you leave, they are back where they started, and that's not a good thing at all. And we need to ask ourselves whether that is something we want to do or not. Do we want to leave people where they are because our interest is only their spiritual needs? We do not seem to care about other needs that they actually have or should have. So, give proper recognition. That means get to know what and how of the situation in the community. And then I think the second thing is, don't help people until you know they are in need. It can be quite insolent for you to go offering somebody something they already have. I've not forgotten an experience I saw where a missionary wanted to teach church women how to bake, how to crochet, things like that. But as one of the members of the church was a graduate in home economics, this missionary lady, I don't think she had a degree. She is only the things that she had been taught by her mother. So what does that mean? She expects this lecturer in home economics to sit there to be taught because the teacher is a white woman. And do you know that teacher actually did? Until we challenged her, why would you not offer to pair up with the missionary so that you can help the other women because you know better than them? So I think it's important that you don't go giving help until you know that help is actually required, is actually needed, because otherwise you end up doing things that would make people think you are looking down on them, that you don't care about them, and that will not be a very good thing if you really are after bringing transformation in a community. The general principle is help the needy, but only help those who truly need. You know, in the days of the New Testament and earlier, you could not own any property as a woman, and there are many jobs you would not be expected to do. What that meant is that if your husband died, you had no source of income. Widowhood is poverty, equal to poverty, and that was quite an issue. So you need to understand that need. So when you talk about recognize a widow, honor a widow, please understand that you recognize that they need assistance, because you did not expect anybody in the government in those days to help your widows. It is you to see how you can help those widows. You know, you did not actually you did not have a social system that says that the rich to be taxed so that they actually help the poor. That wasn't there. So the widows then became a very vulnerable class of people. And if you go through the Old Testament, they're always talking about helping the foreigner, the widow. It was very important that you understand that class, because foreigners are the same way could not own land, just like widows. They were all seen as vulnerable. Today, in your own community, you have to decide who that is. But I think even now, the women, some may need help, but sometimes there are men who actually are the ones that are helpless and actually need help. But it's important to ask yourself, this woman, what was she left with by the husband? Because it's possible that she has inherited enough to actually live on. So don't just assume because somebody has lost a husband, they now must need help. You need to actually find out. Maybe the husband had looked and planned well, so that in his absence, his wife would be well looked after. But number two, it may also be possible that she has adult children, and those adult children are doing well financially, so they can look after their wives and look after their mother. And that again, not in every case, you can be having children, but they are also needing help. So check. Yeah, number one is you're a widow. Number two is, do you actually need what this help that the church is offering? So when you talk about recognizing or honoring, I think we are talking about, if you recognize my need, it means you are touched by my need. And then you help me to sustain myself so that the need does not bring me down. So we must seek. When we say we recognize, we must seek to do something about it. It's not a very good idea to say, oh, I can see you have nothing to eat. Oh, sorry. And then you go to eat yourself. Doesn't sound very, that's not recognition. You need to do something about what you have actually recognized. You know, the principles that this passage in 1 Timothy chapter 5 is giving us is actually very relevant even today. Because we may look at the congregation in a place, I think they are okay, or think they are very poor. And whatever line we take, we need to take action. And that will be an important thing. I think in almost any congregation you go to, if the pastor is doing visitation and getting to know his people, he is likely to give you stories of how the kind of poverty they have had to deal with and the kind of help they have had to give. And sometimes the people contacting you are not members of the church. They're just people with needs, and they think that the church can help them before they die. But I think that's you shouldn't feel disturbed. You should feel that like the reason why God has put you in that among those people, and you should give assistance as much as you can. But it's a very difficult issue because the church may not be having as many resources as are required by the community that they are operating from. It is hard to deal with these kind of situations, although you may actually be loving them. But sometimes you give, but you don't love them. And yet, what you are requiring is both love, that will bring them to the Lord, and rescue, and therefore the relief food or the assistance. And it's an important thing. However, there's another one. People who take advantage of the church, advantage of the Christians. In other words, they pretend to need help. They are already richer than you, and they come and pretend to be poor. You give them, and they go laughing at how foolish Christians can be. I don't think the word of God would encourage us to allow ourselves to be taken advantage of. I don't think it is. It would be a good idea. We need to verify. Don't just help. Sometimes when I see a stranger and they're coming for help, I ask, have you gone to your own friends who know the truth? For them, you don't have to convince them. For me, you have to convince them you actually need. Why not start with them? Because if you are eager to help without any due diligence, you end up being conned. And the things God has given you as a steward, you will not be a good steward when you allow yourself to be conned. We all have experiences with the kind of men who call from a place with big, sad story and tell you how much they need your help, and they plead for money in the name of Christian love. And sometimes you feel so guilty you give. Only later do you realize you have just been taken advantage of. Sometimes they even fake it. They tell you to come and see how bad things are. But then they have disorganized their room, made it dirty, made it look terrible, so that they can win the help they are trying to get from you. Can you imagine going into all that effort to get free things? That's why we must teach people not to want free things and yet still help them. But they should not be enjoying being given. Otherwise, they will stop working in order to receive free things. And I think that's important to ask yourself. And yet, again, to say because you don't want to be conned or taken advantage of, you will not help. The scripture doesn't seem to suggest you should do that in the name of Christ. I think you need to see yourself responsible for helping your community. When asked to describe your favorite Bible verse, almost always one man would give one verse or the other. There's a way of showing that they truly are Christians, but helpless. But the help should not be based on becoming Christian, because that's the way you encourage people to lie that they are Christians. Ever heard of people who are called the rice Christians? Rice, because when there is a famine and the NGO comes with rice, a Christian NGO comes with rice, all of them end up in church. And they will remain in church until the relief food is no longer being given. Then after that, they just go back to their religion. So they were rice Christians. They were not really serious Christians. So even in our needing to help people, we need to be careful that we don't create that kind of something by saying, unless you are Christian, I will not give you food. They will become Christians. And they are not really repentant. They're just trying to convince you to give them food. In some occasions, when helping people in need, you may be asked to actually even take over not immediate problems, but long-term problems. Again, you have to think of yourself that any help you give people on areas they can help themselves, you actually are demeaning their future, where they will no longer know how to look after themselves. And that will not be a good thing at all. So, I think you need to be careful not to be taken advantage of, but I think at the same time, you need to tell yourself clearly that God expects me to help the needy in my community. So, the big question is what Paul is raising in this verse. Are they really needy? Are they really widows? So you're saying help only those who really are widows. And that you have to look at the context of their needs for finances. But then, again, you have agreed you treat them with dignity. So, Paul is introducing a very important part of the church. We must care for those in need. Of course, the Bible also is saying starting with those in the household of faith. So you cannot go helping people that are poor in the community, and you have not even helped the ones that are members of your church. So it's important to begin with your church, but don't end up with your church. It will be important that you help others in the community who are not in church. Later, they may choose to come to Christ because of the kind of love you have shown them, but it will not be a condition that you will not give somebody unless they become Christians. Witness to them, that's important. Force them, that's not important. That's not the way to go.